The black mourning dress hung on Tabitha Bennett's frame like a shroud of shame as she stood before the assembled town council of Piach, Nevada, her chin raised despite the trembling in her hands. 5 men sat in judgment behind a scarred oak table, their faces hard as the silver ore that had built this rough mining town in 1878, and every one of them looked at her like she was something that needed to be scraped off the bottom of a boot. "Mrs. Bennett," Councilman Hargrove began, his jowls quivering with barely concealed irritation, "your husband has been dead for 6 months now. You have refused 3 perfectly respectable offers of marriage. This behavior is unacceptable for a woman of your station." Tabitha's fingers tightened on the worn fabric of her skirt. At 24 years old, she had already buried 1 husband, and the thought of being forced into another loveless marriage made her stomach turn. "I am still in mourning, gentlemen. My late husband deserves at least a year of respect." "Respect?" Hargrove's voice rose sharply. "What about respect for this community? You occupy a house that could shelter a proper family. You receive a widow's portion from the church fund that could go to someone more deserving, and you refuse every attempt to help you find your proper place." The proper place for a widow, Tabitha had learned, was wherever men decided to put her. When Jacob Bennett had died in a mining accident, crushed beneath a tunnel collapse that claimed 7 men, she had grieved genuinely despite their arranged marriage never blossoming into real affection. He had been kind enough, distant enough, and their 2 years together had been marked more by polite coexistence than passion, but at least she had been allowed her own thoughts, her own small freedoms. "I have given my answer," Tabitha said quietly. "I need more time." "Time has run out," another councilman interjected. This was Morrison, owner of the largest saloon in Piach, a man whose eyes always lingered too long on young women. "We have been patient with your peculiar notions, Mrs. Bennett, but this town operates on certain standards. A woman alone is either a wife, a daughter, or a whore. You are choosing to be none of the first 2. Heat flooded Tabitha's cheeks. "How dare you suggest?" "We suggest nothing," Hargrove interrupted. "We simply state facts. You have 1 week to accept one of the marriage proposals extended to you, or you will be asked to leave Piach. We will not support a woman who refuses to contribute properly to our community." The words hit her like physical blows. Leave Piach? With what money? With what prospects? Widows had few rights and fewer options. The small house she occupied belonged to the mining company. The widow's stipend she received would cease the moment she was no longer considered respectable. Everything she owned could fit in a single trunk, and none of it would buy her passage to a new life. "You cannot do this," she whispered. "This is my home." "Your home is where a husband provides for you," Morrison said coldly. "Choose wisely, Mrs. Bennett. Tom Hutchins is willing to take you despite your advancing age. Or there is Samuel Porter, who needs someone to care for his 5 children. Either would be acceptable." Tabitha knew both men. Hutchins was nearly 60, a harsh man who had beaten his first wife so regularly that half the town had known about it, but no one had intervened. Samuel Porter was younger but overwhelmed, looking not for a wife but for free labor to raise children who had driven away 2 stepmothers already. Neither option represented anything but a different kind of death. "I will not marry either of those men," she said, her voice stronger now. "I will not be sold like cattle because it is convenient for you." The councilmen exchanged glances. Hargrove's face hardened. "Then you have chosen your path. You have until Sunday next to vacate the premises. This meeting is concluded." Tabitha turned and walked from the building with her spine straight and her head high. But the moment she stepped into the dusty street of Piach, the reality of her situation crashed over her like a collapsing mine shaft. The afternoon sun blazed down on the ramshackle buildings that clung to the hillside, on the false-fronted stores and the stamp mills that never stopped their mechanical pounding. This town had been built on silver and blood, and it had no mercy for anyone who did not serve its purposes. She made her way through the crowded streets, past miners covered in dust, past women who turned their faces away from her. Word would spread quickly. By tomorrow, everyone would know she had been declared unsuitable, cast out. The scarlet letter in Piotch was not adultery but defiance. Her little house sat at the edge of town, a simple wooden structure that had never felt like home but had at least been shelter. Tabitha let herself inside and stood in the cramped main room, looking at the sparse furnishings, the cold stove, the narrow bed in the corner. 6 days. She had 6 days to figure out how to survive in a world that punished women for wanting to control their own lives. That evening, as the sun set in violent streaks of orange and red over the Nevada mountains, Tabitha sat at her small table and counted her money. $37. Enough for a stagecoach ticket somewhere, perhaps, but not enough to establish a new life. She had no skills that would earn her respectable employment, no family to take her in. Her parents were long dead, and Jacob's family had made it clear they wanted nothing to do with her. A knock at the door startled her from her calculations. For a wild moment, she considered not answering, but whoever stood outside knocked again, more insistently. She opened the door to find a stranger standing on her threshold. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair that curled slightly at his collar and eyes the color of weathered denim. Dust covered his clothes, suggesting he had just ridden in from somewhere far away. A battered hat hung from his hand, a gesture of respect that surprised her. "Mrs. Bennett." His voice was deep, rough with trail dust, but not unkind. "Yes," she said warily. "Who are you?" "Name is Vincent Caldwell. I heard in town that you might be in need of employment." Tabitha blinked, uncertain she had heard correctly. "Employment?" "Yes, madam. I have a ranch about 20 miles north of here, up in the valley past the mountains. I need someone to help with the house, cooking, general managing. It would be honest work with honest pay." She stared at him, trying to process this unexpected development. "Why would you offer this to me? You do not even know me." Vincent Caldwell shifted his weight, his eyes meeting hers directly. "I know you are a widow who has been treated poorly by this town. I know you refused to be forced into a marriage you did not want. That tells me you have courage and principle. Those are qualities I respect. The town council says I must marry or leave," Tabitha said slowly, still uncertain of his motives. "I heard that too. But a woman has a right to choose her own path, seems to me. If you are willing to work, I am willing to pay fair wages and provide room and board. No strings attached, no expectations beyond honest labor. You can save your money and decide your own future." It sounded too good to be true, and Tabitha had learned to be suspicious of things that sounded too good to be true. "Why would you do this for a stranger?" Vincent's expression grew serious. "My sister was widowed young. Her husband's family cast her out, said she was too expensive to keep. She died in a workhouse in Missouri, working herself to death for pennies. I swore then that if I ever had the means, I would help women in similar circumstances. Now I have a ranch and I need help, and you need honest work. Seems like it could benefit us both." Tabitha studied his face, looking for signs of deception or ulterior motives. She saw weariness there, and something that might have been old grief, but no trace of the predatory calculation she had seen in so many men's eyes since Jacob died. Vincent Caldwell stood patiently, letting her scrutinize him, not pushing or demanding. "I would need to think about this," she said finally. "Of course. I am staying at the boarding house near the assay office. I will be in town until tomorrow afternoon. If you decide you want to take the position, come find me before noon. If not, I wish you the best of luck." He settled his hat back on his head, nodded politely, and walked away into the gathering darkness. Tabitha closed the door and leaned against it, her heart pounding. An offer of work. Real work with real pay and no marriage required. It seemed impossible. It seemed dangerous. It seemed like the only option she had. She barely slept that night, turning the decision over and over in her mind. What did she know about Vincent Caldwell? Nothing, beyond what he had told her. He could be lying about everything. He could be worse than Hutchins or Porter. He could be dangerous in ways she could not even imagine. But what were her alternatives? Accept a marriage to a man who would control every aspect of her life. Try to make her way to another town with almost no money and no prospects. Hope that some miracle would save her in the next 6 days. By dawn, Tabitha had made her decision. She packed her few belongings into her trunk, dressed in her most practical clothing, and walked through the waking streets of Piotch to the boarding house. The town was stirring to life, the stamp mills resuming their endless pounding, miners heading for the shafts that burrowed into the mountains like worm holes in an apple. Vincent Caldwell was sitting on the porch of the boarding house, drinking coffee from a tin cup. He looked up as she approached, and something that might have been relief crossed his face. "I will accept your offer," Tabitha said before she could lose her nerve. "I will work for you." He stood, setting down his cup. "You are certain? I do not want you to feel pressured." "I am certain." "When do we leave?" "This morning, if you are ready. I have a wagon. We can collect your things and be on the trail by mid-morning." Everything happened quickly after that. Vincent helped her load her trunk into his wagon, a sturdy vehicle pulled by 2 strong horses. A few people watched from windows and doorways as they prepared to leave, but no one came out to say goodbye. Tabitha felt the weight of their judgment and their relief, glad to see the troublesome widow leaving their righteous town. As the wagon rolled out of Piotch, heading north into the mountains, Tabitha looked back once at the place that had been her home for 2 years. She felt no sadness at leaving it behind, only a strange sense of anticipation mixed with fear. She was heading into the unknown with a man she did not know, gambling everything on his word. The trail wound up through rocky passes and down into valleys where scrub brush and sparse grass clung to existence despite the harsh Nevada climate. Vincent drove the wagon with practiced ease, his hands steady on the reins. For the first hour they rode in silence, the only sounds the creak of the wagon and the steady clip of hooves on stone. Finally, Vincent spoke. "I should tell you about the ranch so you know what to expect." "Please," Tabitha said, grateful to break the silence. "It is not a large operation. I run about 200 head of cattle, some horses. The house is decent, 2 stories, more room than I need by myself. There is a barn, a bunkhouse for the hands, though I only have 2 working for me right now. It is quiet, isolated. The nearest neighbor is 10 miles away. You said you need help with the house. I have been doing my own cooking and cleaning, but I am not good at either. The place has gotten run down, and I spend most of my time dealing with the stock and the land. A woman's touch would make it more of a home than just a place to sleep." Tabitha noted his phrasing. "A woman's touch, not a wife's touch. What are the wages?" $20 a month plus room and board." "That is more than most housekeepers make, but I figure you are taking a risk coming out here with a stranger, and fair pay shows respect. $20 a month. In 6 months, she could save more than $100, enough to truly establish herself somewhere if she chose to leave. Enough to have real choices. That is generous." "It is fair," Vincent corrected. "You will earn it. The work will not be easy." They stopped at midday to rest the horses and eat a simple meal of bread and dried meat. Tabitha sat on a rock and looked out at the landscape spreading before them, all red stone and endless sky. It was beautiful in a harsh way, unforgiving but honest, not unlike the man who had offered her this chance. "Why did you never remarry?" she asked suddenly, then immediately regretted the forward question. "Forgive me, that was too personal," but Vincent did not seem offended. "I was married once. She died of fever 5 years ago along with our daughter. They are buried on the ranch, up on a hill where wildflowers grow in the spring. I loved my wife deeply. Have not found anyone since who made me want to try again." The grief in his voice was real and raw, and Tabitha felt an unexpected kinship with this stranger. He understood loss. He understood that some wounds took time to heal if they ever healed at all. "I am sorry for your loss," she said softly. "Thank you. I am sorry for yours as well, though I gather your marriage was not a love match." Tabitha was startled by his perception. "How did you know?" "The way you talked about refusing to remarry. A woman deeply in love with her late husband might feel differently. But a woman who had been married for convenience, for social expectation, she would want something different the second time around, or no second time at all." "You are very observant. I pay attention. That is how you survive out here." They reached the ranch as the sun was lowering toward the western horizon, painting everything in shades of gold and amber. The house was bigger than Tabitha had expected. A solid 2-story structure with a wide porch and glass windows that caught the light. The barn was large and well-maintained, and she could see cattle grazing in the distance on grassland that seemed impossibly green after the dry mountains they had crossed. 2 men emerged from the bunkhouse as the wagon approached. One was older, perhaps 50, with a weathered face and bowlegs that spoke of a lifetime in the saddle. The other was younger, maybe 30, with a quick smile and curious eyes. "This is Pete and Charlie," Vincent said, introducing them. "They work the stock with me. Gentlemen, this is Mrs. Bennett. She will be managing the house." Both men tipped their hats respectfully, and Tabitha saw genuine welcome in their expressions. Whatever they had been told about her arrival, they seemed pleased rather than suspicious. Vincent helped her down from the wagon and carried her trunk into the house. The interior was spacious but clearly neglected, with dust covering most surfaces and dishes piled in the kitchen. The furniture was good quality but showing wear, and curtains hung askew at the windows. "I know it is a mess," Vincent said, sounding almost embarrassed. "Like I said, I have not been good at keeping up with it." "It has good bones," Tabitha said, assessing the space with a practiced eye. "It just needs attention." He showed her to a bedroom on the 2nd floor, a pleasant room with a real bed, a dresser, and a window overlooking the valley. It was larger and nicer than any room she had occupied since childhood, and something in her chest loosened slightly. This could be all right. This could actually work. "I will let you settle in," Vincent said from the doorway. "We eat at sundown, nothing fancy. You do not need to start your duties until tomorrow." "Thank you," Tabitha said, "for all of this, for giving me a choice." His expression softened. "Everyone deserves choices, Mrs. Bennett. I will see you at supper." After he left, Tabitha unpacked her few belongings and stood at the window, watching the land turn purple and then deep blue as night fell. In Piotch, she had felt trapped, suffocated by expectations and judgments. Here, in this isolated valley with a stranger who barely knew her, she felt something unexpected stirring in her chest. Hope. The first weeks at the ranch established a rhythm that Tabitha found surprisingly comfortable. She rose at dawn and prepared breakfast for Vincent and the 2 ranch hands, hearty meals of biscuits and gravy, bacon and eggs, strong coffee that could wake the dead. The men ate with genuine appreciation, thanking her sincerely for every meal, a courtesy she had not often experienced. After breakfast, she would tackle the endless work of bringing the house back to order. Years of bachelor living had left marks everywhere, but beneath the neglect, she found quality and care. Someone, probably Vincent's late wife, had chosen everything with thought and love. Tabitha cleaned and scrubbed and organized, and slowly the house began to transform from a dusty shell into a real home. Vincent was respectful and professional, treating her exactly as he had promised, as an employee deserving of fair treatment and honest pay. He did not linger inappropriately, did not make suggestive comments, did not impose on her space. In the evenings, he often worked in his study on ranch accounts while she sewed or read in the main room. Sometimes they talked about simple things, the weather or the cattle or repairs that needed to be made. Sometimes they sat in companionable silence. It was Pete who told her about Vincent's wife one afternoon, when she brought cold water out to the men working on a fence line. The older cowboy accepted the dipper gratefully and wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. "The boss seems happier these days," he observed. "House looks better too. You have done good work, Mrs. Bennett." "Thank you. I am glad to have a place to do good work." "You know about Sarah, his wife?" "Only that she died, she and their daughter." Pete's expression grew somber. "Fever hit her sudden. The little girl, Emma, she was only 3. Vincent rode for the doctor, but the nearest one was 2 days away. By the time they got back, both were gone. Near broke him. He sold off half the cattle and sent Charlie and me away for a year because he could not stand to have anyone around. When he called us back, he was functional but hollow. Went through the motions, but there was nothing behind his eyes." Tabitha felt her throat tighten. "That must have been terrible for all of you." "It was. But like I said, past few weeks, something has changed. He smiles sometimes, talks more. I think having life in the house again, having someone to care for the place Sarah loved, it is helping him heal." The thought that her presence could provide any kind of comfort to someone else was unexpected and touching. Tabitha found herself paying more attention to Vincent after that conversation, noticing small things. The way he always offered to help carry heavy items, even though that was not his responsibility. The way he asked her opinion on household matters and actually listened to her answers. The way he occasionally smiled at something she said, a real smile that reached his eyes and transformed his entire face. She noticed other things too. The way his shirt stretched across his shoulders when he worked. The calluses on his hands that spoke of hard labor. The gentleness with which he handled the horses, talking to them in a low voice that made them calm and trusting. Vincent Caldwell was not a traditionally handsome man, his features too rough and weathered for that, but there was something compelling about him, something solid and real. Tabitha tried to push those thoughts away. She was not here for romance. She was here to work, to earn money, to build a future on her own terms. The last thing she needed was to develop feelings for her employer, especially a man still grieving his late wife. But feelings, she discovered, did not always follow logic. It was a month after her arrival when everything changed. Tabitha had gone to the henhouse to collect eggs, a task she rather enjoyed because the chickens were foolish and entertaining. She was reaching into a nesting box when she heard shouting from the direction of the barn. She emerged to find Vincent and Charlie struggling with a horse, a beautiful chestnut mare who was clearly in distress. The animal's eyes rolled white with fear and pain, and she kept trying to lie down while the men worked to keep her standing. "What is wrong?" Tabitha called, hurrying toward them. "She is trying to foal, but something is not right," Vincent shouted back. "Charlie, get some rope. We need to restrain her or she will hurt herself." Tabitha had grown up on a farm before her family lost everything. She knew animals, knew births. "Let me look." Vincent started to protest, but she was already moving past him, talking to the mare in a low, soothing voice. The horse's flanks were dark with sweat, her breathing labored. Tabitha ran her hands over the distended belly, feeling for the position of the foal. "The baby is turned wrong," she said, her mind clicking through old knowledge. "If we do not help her, she will die trying to birth it." "Can you turn it?" Vincent asked urgently. "Maybe. I have done it before with cattle, but I will need help holding her steady." What followed was an hour of intense, exhausting work. Tabitha stripped to her chemise, not caring about modesty when a life hung in the balance. She worked with steady hands and gentle firmness, talking constantly to the frightened mare while Vincent and Charlie held the animal as still as possible. Sweat poured down her face, her arms ached, but she could feel the foal shifting, turning, finally aligning properly. When the baby finally slipped free into the straw, covered in membrane and impossibly fragile, Tabitha felt tears spring to her eyes. The mare immediately turned to nuzzle her foal, making soft, whickering sounds of relief and love. Within minutes, the baby was trying to stand on wobbly legs. "You did it," Vincent said, his voice filled with wonder. "You saved them both." Tabitha looked down at herself, covered in blood and birth fluids and straw, and started to laugh. It was probably hysteria, but she could not stop. She had spent weeks trying to be a proper lady housekeeper, and here she was looking like she had been through a war. Vincent began to laugh too, and then Charlie joined in, and the three of them stood in the barn laughing until tears ran down their faces while the new mother horse tended her baby. Later, after Tabitha had cleaned up and changed into fresh clothes, Vincent knocked on her bedroom door. When she opened it, he stood there holding something wrapped in cloth. "I wanted to give you this," he said. "It was Sarah's. I have been saving it, not sure what to do with it. But I think she would want you to have it." Tabitha unwrapped the cloth to find a beautiful shawl, woven in shades of blue and green that reminded her of summer skies and new grass. It was the finest thing she had ever held. "I cannot take this," she protested. "It was your wife's." "And she would have liked you," Vincent said firmly. "She would have admired what you did today, your skill and courage. Please, it would mean something to me if you would accept it." Tabitha looked at him, at the sincerity in his eyes, and felt something shift inside her chest. This was not about replacing his wife. This was about honoring her memory by gifting something precious to someone who had earned his respect. "Thank you," she said softly. "I will treasure it." Their eyes met and held, and for a moment the air between them seemed to thicken with something unspoken. Then Vincent stepped back, clearing his throat. "You should rest. That was hard work. Take tomorrow morning off if you need it." "I will be fine," Tabitha assured him, though her arms did ache. "But I appreciate the consideration." After he left, she wrapped the shawl around her shoulders and stood at the window, watching stars appear in the darkening sky. She was in trouble, she realized. She was falling for Vincent Caldwell, falling for his quiet strength and his respectful manner, and the way he looked at her like she was a person of value rather than a problem to be solved. This was not part of the plan. This was not why she had come here. But her heart apparently had its own agenda. The summer deepened into full heat, the Nevada sun beating down on the valley with relentless intensity. The work was hard but satisfying, and Tabitha found herself thriving in ways she never had in Piotch. Out here, away from the judgment and expectations of town society, she could be herself. She could work with her hands, make real contributions, be valued for her skills rather than judged for her marital status. She and Vincent developed an easy friendship, talking in the evenings about everything and nothing. He told her about growing up in Missouri, about fighting in the war as a young man, about the dream of building something lasting in the West. She told him about her childhood on a failing farm, about her parents' deaths, about the arranged marriage to Jacob that had been more duty than desire. "You regret it?" Vincent asked one evening as they sat on the porch watching fireflies dance in the gathering dusk. "Marrying him?" Tabitha considered the question carefully. "No, he was kind to me in his way, we just never connected deeply. When he died, I felt sad but not devastated. Then I felt guilty for not feeling more. Does that make me terrible? It makes you honest. Not all marriages are love matches." "Most are not, I suppose. People marry for practical reasons, for survival. Nothing wrong with that. Your marriage was different." "Yes, I was lucky. I loved Sarah from the first moment I saw her. She made me laugh, made me want to be better. When she died, part of me died too." He paused, then added quietly, "But not all of me. There is still life left to live." The way he looked at her when he said that made Tabitha's breath catch. She wanted to say something, to acknowledge the current running between them, but fear held her back. What if she was misreading everything? What if he was only being kind to a woman he had rescued from a bad situation? The moment passed, and they went back to comfortable conversation. But something had shifted. Tabitha lay awake that night thinking about possibilities, about futures that might include more than just earning wages and eventual independence. Dangerous thoughts for a woman who had sworn not to be forced into anything ever again. But this would not be force. A small voice whispered in her mind. This would be choice. In mid-August, Vincent asked her to accompany him to check on some cattle in the high pastures. It would be a full day's ride, possibly requiring an overnight camp if the herd had drifted too far. Tabitha agreed immediately, eager to see more of the ranch and secretly thrilled at the prospect of time alone with him. They set out at dawn, riding side by side through the valley and up into the hills where pine trees grew in fragrant clusters. Vincent had taught her to ride properly over the past months, and she now sat a horse with confidence. The air was cooler at higher elevations, perfumed with sage and pine, and the sky stretched overhead in endless blue perfection. They found the cattle in a high meadow, grazing peacefully near a stream. Vincent counted them carefully, checking for any signs of illness or injury, while Tabitha refilled their canteens with cold water from the creek. Everything was in order, but it was already afternoon and the ride back would take hours. "We should camp here tonight," Vincent decided. "Head back in the morning when it is cooler." They set up a simple camp near the stream, and Vincent shot a rabbit that he roasted over the fire. As the sun set and stars began to emerge, Tabitha wrapped Sarah's shawl around her shoulders against the cooling air. They ate in companionable silence, listening to the night sounds of the wilderness. "Can I ask you something?" Vincent said finally, his voice thoughtful. "Of course." "Do you plan to stay? Or are you saving money to leave to start over somewhere else?" The question cut to the heart of something Tabitha had been avoiding thinking about. When she had first arrived, the plan had been clear. Work, save money, gain independence. But somewhere along the way, that plan had become less certain. "I do not know," she admitted. "When I left Piotch, all I wanted was freedom, the ability to make my own choices. But now I have been here almost 3 months and I find myself thinking less about leaving and more about staying." "What changed?" Tabitha looked at him across the fire, at his strong features painted in flickering orange light, at his eyes watching her with an intensity that made her heart race. This was the moment. She could be safe and vague, or she could be honest and brave. She chose brave. "You changed," she said softly. "This place changed. I came here expecting to work and save and move on, but I did not expect to find a place that felt like home. I did not expect to care about the mare and her foal, or about Pete and Charlie, or about whether the garden produces enough vegetables for winter." She paused, then added even more quietly, "I did not expect to care about you." Vincent was very still, his eyes never leaving her face. "Tabitha, I know you are still grieving," she continued quickly, needing to say it all before courage failed. "I know you loved your wife deeply. I am not trying to replace her or push for something you are not ready for. I just wanted you to know. You gave me a choice when no one else would, and I am choosing to tell you the truth about how I feel." The silence stretched between them, broken only by the crackle of the fire and the distant sound of the stream. Tabitha's heart hammered against her ribs. She had risked everything, laid herself bare, and now she had to wait for his response. Vincent stood and moved around the fire to sit beside her. He reached out and took her hand, his calloused fingers warm against hers. "I have been thinking about you constantly," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "I hired you to help with the house, but you have done so much more than that. You brought life back to a place that was dying. You made me remember what it feels like to look forward to something, to want to come inside at the end of the day because there is warmth and laughter waiting. I told myself to be patient, to not rush anything, to give you time to settle without pressure. And now," Tabitha whispered, "now I want to tell you that I care for you too, deeply. It is different from what I felt for Sarah, but no less real. She was my first love, my young love. What I feel for you is something new, something built on respect and admiration and genuine affection. I know you have been hurt by how people treated you. I know you came here seeking independence, not another man trying to control your life. So I am asking, not telling. Would you consider letting this become something more, at your pace, with your rules?" Tabitha felt tears sliding down her cheeks, but they were not tears of sadness. She squeezed his hand tightly. "Yes, I would consider it. I am considering it. I want this, Vincent." He lifted his free hand to her face, gently wiping away her tears with his thumb. "I want to court you properly. I want to give you time to be sure. You have been through so much upheaval. I do not want you to feel rushed into anything. I do not feel rushed. I feel like I am finally making a choice from a place of wanting rather than necessity. That is the gift you gave me, the freedom to choose." Vincent leaned forward slowly, giving her every opportunity to pull away. When their lips met, it was gentle and sweet, nothing demanding or possessive about it. Just two people acknowledging something fragile and precious growing between them. When they pulled apart, both were smiling. Vincent kept her hand in his thumb tracing patterns on her skin. "We should probably head back at first light. People talk, and I do not want your reputation damaged." Tabitha laughed softly. "My reputation in Piotch is already destroyed, but I appreciate the consideration." They sat together by the fire until late into the night, talking and planning and dreaming. Vincent told her about his hopes for the ranch, about wanting to expand the herd and maybe plant an orchard. Tabitha shared her ideas for improving the house, for starting a proper vegetable garden, for making curtains and rugs to replace the worn ones. They were domestic dreams, simple dreams, but they felt profound because they were chosen freely. They returned to the ranch the next morning to find Pete and Charlie grinning like idiots. Apparently, their changing relationship was not as subtle as they had thought. But the two ranch hands were clearly pleased, offering congratulations and teasing Vincent good-naturedly about being a lucky man. Over the following weeks, Vincent courted Tabitha with old-fashioned dedication. He brought her wildflowers from the high meadows. He carved her a beautiful wooden box for her sewing supplies. He took her riding in the evenings, showing her the boundaries of the ranch and pointing out landmarks. He kissed her goodnight on the porch, sweet kisses that promised more but never pushed. Tabitha felt herself falling deeper in love with every passing day. This was what she had never known with Jacob, this sense of partnership and mutual respect. Vincent asked her opinion on ranch matters and actually valued her input. He supported her ideas for improvements to the house and garden. He made her laugh with dry observations about the cattle's personalities. He held her when she had nightmares about being dragged back to Piotch. In September, as the heat began to ease and the aspens on the mountainsides turned to gold, Vincent took her up to the hill where Sarah and Emma were buried. Two simple wooden crosses marked the graves, surrounded by wildflowers that had gone to seed. "I wanted to bring you here," Vincent said quietly. "I wanted you to know that loving you does not mean forgetting them. They will always be part of me. But there is room in my heart for you too, for something new and different and just as real." Tabitha knelt beside the graves and placed a small bouquet of late blooming flowers she had brought. "I wish I could have known them. I wish I could thank Sarah for loving you and making you into the man you are." "She would have liked you," Vincent said, certainty in his voice. "She believed women should have choices, should be valued for more than their ability to serve men. You would have been friends." That evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the valley in shades of rose and gold, Vincent took Tabitha's hand and looked at her with serious eyes. "I know we have only been officially courting for a few weeks, but I have known you for months now. I have seen you work hard, face challenges, show courage and compassion. I know my own heart and I know what I want." He paused, then continued, "Tabitha Bennett, will you marry me? Not because society demands it or because you have no other option, but because you want to, because you love me the way I love you." Tabitha's heart felt so full she could barely breathe. This was nothing like her first proposal, which had been a practical arrangement negotiated by relatives. This was a man she loved offering her a future built on mutual respect and genuine affection. "Yes," she said, her voice strong and sure. "I will marry you, Vincent Caldwell. I will marry you because I love you, because I choose you, because I cannot imagine my future without you in it." He kissed her then, deeper and more passionate than before, and Tabitha felt herself responding with equal fervor. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathing hard, and Vincent's eyes were dark with desire and restraint. "We should set a date," he said, his voice rough. "Soon. I am not sure how much longer I can be a gentleman about this." Tabitha laughed, feeling bold and beautiful and wanted in ways she had never experienced. "Next month. October is beautiful here. We can have a simple ceremony with Pete and Charlie as witnesses. You do not want to go into town. Have a church wedding. No, I want something private and meaningful, not a performance for people who cast me out. Just us and the people we care about. Then that is what we will have." They spent the next few weeks preparing for the wedding and for their future together. Tabitha sewed herself a new dress in deep blue, not white because she was no blushing virgin but a woman who knew her own mind. Vincent cleaned and repaired things around the house with new enthusiasm, wanting everything to be perfect for their life together. In mid-October, on a crisp morning with golden leaves swirling in the breeze, they were married on the hill overlooking the valley. Pete had ridden to the nearest town to fetch a traveling preacher, a kind-faced man who performed the ceremony with simple dignity. Charlie stood as Vincent's best man, and Pete gave Tabitha away, his weathered face crumpling with emotion as he placed her hand in Vincent's. "Do you, Vincent Caldwell, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold from this day forward?" the preacher intoned. "I do," Vincent said firmly, his eyes locked on Tabitha's face. "I choose her freely and with my whole heart." "And do you, Tabitha Bennett, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband?" "I do," Tabitha said, her voice ringing clear and strong. "I choose him freely and with my whole heart." When they kissed as husband and wife, sealing their vows, Tabitha felt a sense of rightness settle into her bones. This was what marriage should be. Two people choosing each other, committing to build something together based on love and respect rather than obligation or convenience. They celebrated with a feast that Tabitha had spent days preparing, and Pete produced a fiddle that Tabitha had not known he could play. He played old songs while Vincent danced with his bride in the front room of the house, their shadows flickering on the walls in the lamplight. Charlie sang along in a surprisingly good tenor, and everyone drank whiskey and laughed until tears ran down their faces. When the evening finally ended and Pete and Charlie retreated to the bunkhouse with knowing grins, Vincent led Tabitha up the stairs to the bedroom they would now share. He had moved his things in during the day, and the room felt different, more complete somehow. "Are you nervous?" Vincent asked gently, cupping her face in his hands. "A little," Tabitha admitted. "My first marriage was not very passionate. Jacob was kind but not particularly interested. I am not sure what to expect." "Expect me to love you thoroughly," Vincent said, his voice low and intent. "Expect me to take my time and make sure you feel cherished. Expect this to be different from anything you have known before." He kissed her then, deep and demanding, and Tabitha felt heat flood through her body. This was desire, real desire, something she had only read about in scandalous novels. Vincent's hands were gentle but confident as he helped her out of her wedding dress, as he laid her on the bed, and showed her with touch and whispered words exactly how much he wanted her. Their lovemaking was tender and passionate by turns, and Tabitha discovered sensations and pleasures she had not known existed. Vincent paid attention to her responses, learning what made her gasp and arch and finally cry out with unexpected ecstasy. When it was over and they lay tangled together in the moonlight streaming through the window, Tabitha felt transformed. This was what intimacy should be, this sense of connection and vulnerability and joy. "I love you," she whispered against his chest. "I love you too," Vincent murmured into her hair. "Thank you for choosing me. Thank you for giving me a second chance at happiness. Thank you for giving me a first chance at real love." The months that followed were the happiest of Tabitha's life. She and Vincent fell into a rhythm of partnership, working together to run the ranch and build their life. She managed the household and garden with skill and pride, and Vincent consulted her on all major decisions about the ranch. They were true partners, each respecting the other's strengths and contributions. Winter came to the valley, bringing snow that turned the landscape into a pristine white wilderness. The work was different in winter but no less important, focused on keeping animals fed and healthy through the cold months. Tabitha learned to love the cozy evenings when everyone gathered in the main house, Pete and Charlie joining them for dinner and card games while wind howled outside. In December, Tabitha began to suspect she might be pregnant. Her monthly courses had always been regular, and when they failed to arrive, followed by morning sickness that had her rushing outside to vomit, she knew. She told Vincent one evening as they lay in bed, and the joy that lit his face made her cry with happiness. "A baby," he said wonderingly, his hand moving to rest on her still flat stomach. "Our baby. Oh, Tabitha, you have given me so much." "We have given each other everything," she corrected, covering his hand with hers. The pregnancy progressed smoothly, and as winter softened into spring and Tabitha's belly swelled with new life, she felt complete in ways she had never imagined possible. This baby was wanted, cherished, born of real love rather than obligation. Whether it was a boy or girl did not matter. This child would grow up knowing it was deeply loved by both parents. In early June, when the valley was green with new growth and wildflowers bloomed in riotous profusion, Tabitha went into labor. Vincent rode like fury for the midwife who lived 15 miles away while Pete and Charlie stayed with Tabitha, trying to help but mostly looking terrified. The midwife, a capable woman named Mrs. Hendricks, arrived in time to oversee the birth. After hours of hard labor that tested Tabitha's strength to its limits, she finally brought her son into the world. He was perfect, with a shock of dark hair and strong lungs that announced his arrival with furious cries. Vincent came back into the room, his face pale with worry, until he saw Tabitha holding their baby. Then he was across the room in 3 strides, kneeling beside the bed, tears streaming down his face as he looked at his wife and son. "He is perfect," Vincent said hoarsely. "You are perfect. Thank you, thank you, thank you." "Thomas," Tabitha said softly. "I thought we could name him Thomas after my father." "Thomas Caldwell," Vincent tried out the name. "It is strong. It is perfect." They buried themselves in the joy of new parenthood, learning together how to care for this tiny person who had transformed their lives. Vincent was a devoted father, walking the floor with Thomas when he cried at night, changing diapers without complaint, talking to his son in that low, gentle voice that had first charmed the horses. Pete and Charlie became doting uncles, competing to see who could make the baby smile first. The ranch thrived under the combined efforts of everyone working together. Life was good, better than good. It was everything Tabitha had never dared to dream possible. One day in August, when Thomas was 2 months old and gurgling happily on a blanket on the porch, a rider appeared on the road leading to the ranch. As he drew closer, Tabitha recognized him with a shock that turned her blood cold. It was Councilman Hargrove from Piotch, looking hot and dusty and irritated. Vincent came to stand beside her, his arm protective around her shoulders. "I will handle this." Hargrove dismounted heavily and approached the porch with a scowl. His eyes moved from Tabitha to the baby to Vincent, and his scowl deepened. "Mrs. Bennett," he began, but Vincent interrupted. "Mrs. Caldwell," he corrected coldly. "We were married last October." Hargrove's face reddened. "I see. Well, I suppose congratulations are in order. What do you want?" Tabitha asked, finding her voice. Her fear was fading, replaced by anger at this man's intrusion into her happy life. "The town council has reconsidered its position regarding your situation. We understand you married respectably and have established yourself well. We wanted to extend an invitation for you to return to Piotch, to take your proper place in the community." Tabitha stared at him in disbelief. "You cast me out for refusing to be forced into marriage. You threatened and humiliated me. And now you want me to return." "We may have been hasty," Hargrove admitted grudgingly, "but a married woman of good standing would be welcomed back." "No." Tabitha's voice was firm and clear. "I will not return to Piotch, not to visit and certainly not to live. You gave me a choice. Submit or leave. I left. I found real happiness, real love, real respect. I will not give that up to rejoin a community that treated me like property." "Now see here. You need to leave," Vincent said, his voice hard as iron. "My wife has given you her answer. We have no interest in anything Piotch has to offer. Our life is here, and it is a good life built on choices freely made. I suggest you ride back and tell your council that their belated approval means nothing to people who have found real happiness." Hargrove sputtered with indignation, but he remounted his horse. Before he rode away, he turned back one more time. "You are making a mistake, Mrs. Caldwell. That town could have given you standing and security." "This ranch gives me something better," Tabitha said quietly. "It gives me freedom. It gives me love. It gives me a partner who values me for who I am, not what I can provide for his convenience. That is worth more than all the standing and security your narrow little town could ever offer." They watched Hargrove ride away, his back stiff with offense, until he disappeared into the distance. Then Vincent turned to Tabitha and pulled her close, careful not to crush the baby between them. "I am so proud of you," he said. "You have come so far from the frightened woman who knocked on my door at the boarding house." "I was never really frightened," Tabitha said with a smile. "I was angry and desperate and determined. But you gave me the chance to be more than that. You gave me the chance to be happy." They stood together on the porch of their home, watching the valley stretch out before them in all its wild beauty, their son cooing contentedly in his mother's arms. This was what freedom looked like, Tabitha realized. Not just the absence of constraints, but the presence of choice, of love, of mutual respect. The years that followed brought both challenges and joys. The ranch prospered under their combined stewardship, growing into one of the most successful operations in the territory. Thomas grew into a sturdy, curious boy with his father's steady temperament and his mother's quick mind. 2 years after his birth, they welcomed a daughter, Rose, who had her mother's green eyes and her father's stubborn streak. Pete and Charlie remained with them, becoming beloved members of an unconventional family. They taught Thomas to ride and rope, and they were endlessly patient with little Rose's questions about everything under the sun. In time, Charlie married a widow from the nearest town, and she and her 2 daughters moved to the ranch, adding more life and laughter to the growing community. Tabitha never returned to Piotch, and she never regretted it. She heard occasionally about happenings in the town, about the mines that failed and the people who moved on, seeking fortune elsewhere. The town that had cast her out faded in importance until it was just a distant memory of a place she had once been trapped. Her real life, the life that mattered, was here in this valley with the man she loved and the family they had built together. She and Vincent grew old together, their love deepening rather than diminishing with time. They faced droughts and harsh winters, sick animals and broken fences, but they faced everything together as equal partners. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Vincent took her back up to the hill where they had been married. The graves of his first wife and daughter were still there, well tended, but the hill was now also the site of many happy memories. It was where they brought the children for picnics, where they went to watch sunsets and count stars. "You remember what I told you when I asked you to marry me," Vincent said, his arm around her waist as they looked out over the valley that had become their kingdom. "You told me you knew your own heart," Tabitha recalled. "You asked me to marry you not because I had to, but because I wanted to. Best decision I ever made asking you. Best decision you ever made saying yes. We have built something good here," Tabitha said, leaning into his strength. "Something real and lasting. Our children will grow up knowing they have choices, knowing their worth is not determined by others' judgments. That is what you gave me, Vincent. You gave me choices when everyone else tried to take them away." "You gave me something too," Vincent said softly. "You gave me a second chance at happiness. You showed me that loving someone new did not mean forgetting the past. You brought life and joy back to a place that was dying. I will spend the rest of my days thanking God you walked into that boarding house and took a chance on a stranger." Tabitha turned in his arms and kissed him, a kiss that held 20 years of love and partnership and mutual respect. "It was not a chance I took on a stranger," she said. "It was a choice I made for myself, the first real choice I ever had and the best one I ever made." As the sun set over their valley, painting the sky in shades of pink and purple and gold, Vincent and Tabitha Caldwell walked back down the hill toward their home. Smoke rose from the chimney, and they could hear children's laughter and the sounds of their extended family preparing the evening meal. Their son Thomas, now a young man of 19, had taken over much of the daily operation of the ranch, proving himself as capable and fair-minded as his father. Rose, 17 and fierce in all the best ways, had announced her intention to become a teacher, to help other young women understand they had value beyond marriage and motherhood. Tabitha and Vincent supported both children's dreams completely, knowing that giving children choices was one of the greatest gifts parents could offer. The ranch continued to thrive, but more than that, it had become a haven for people who needed second chances. Over the years, Vincent and Tabitha had taken in other women fleeing bad situations, offering them honest work and fair treatment. Some stayed, some moved on to build lives elsewhere, but all left knowing they had worth and value beyond what society tried to impose on them. As they entered their home that evening, surrounded by family and friends, laughter and warmth, Tabitha felt a profound sense of gratitude. She had been cast out by people who believed a woman's only value lay in her willingness to submit, to marry whomever they chose, to accept her lack of agency with grace. But in being cast out, she had found her true home. That night, after everyone else had gone to bed, Vincent and Tabitha sat together on the porch as they had done thousands of times before. The stars stretched overhead in brilliant profusion, and the night air carried the scent of hay and horses and the promise of tomorrow. "If you could go back," Vincent asked, a familiar question between them, "would you change anything?" "Not a single thing," Tabitha answered honestly. "Every hardship led me here to you, to this life we built. I would not trade it for anything." "Neither would I," Vincent said, pulling her close. "You are my choice, Tabitha Caldwell. Every day for the rest of my life you are my choice." "And you are mine," she replied. "Always and forever you are my choice." They sat together in the peaceful dark, two people who had found each other when both had needed it most. A widow who had refused to submit, and a widower who had honored her refusal. Together, they had built not just a ranch but a legacy of love and respect, and the fundamental truth that everyone deserves the freedom to choose their own path. Their story would be told for generations in that valley, the tale of the widow who was cast out and the cowboy who gave her a choice. But more than that, it was a testament to the transformative power of love freely given and respect honestly earned. In the end, it was the simplest and most profound truth. When two people choose each other with full hearts and open eyes, they can build something that lasts not just a lifetime but forever. The years continued to pass in their peaceful rhythm, marked by changing seasons and the milestones of a life well lived. Thomas eventually married a strong-minded young woman from a neighboring ranch, and they gave Vincent and Tabitha their first grandchildren, twin boys who kept everyone perpetually exhausted and entertained. Rose did indeed become a teacher, establishing a small school on the ranch property where she taught not just the children of the area, but also adult women who wanted to learn to read and write and manage accounts. Pete passed away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 72, having spent his final years teaching Thomas everything he knew about ranching and horses. They buried him on the hill near Sarah and Emma, a fitting resting place for a man who had been family in every way that mattered. Charlie and his wife continued to thrive, their blended family growing to include grandchildren who called the ranch home. On a summer evening when Tabitha was 54 and Vincent 58, they climbed the hill one more time. It was harder now, their knees not what they once were, but they made the journey together as they had always done everything, side by side, supporting each other. They sat on the bench Vincent had built years ago, looking out over the valley that had witnessed their entire life together. The ranch sprawled below them, prosperous and peaceful, a testament to decades of hard work and dedication. "You think we did right by them?" Tabitha asked, meaning their children, the people they had helped, the legacy they were building. "I know we did," Vincent said with certainty. We taught them that respect matters, that choices matter, that love freely given is the greatest gift of all. What more could we have done? Nothing, Tabitha agreed. We did exactly what we were supposed to do. We chose each other, and then we chose to build something good. Vincent took her hand, his fingers still strong despite the years, and raised it to his lips. I would do it all again. Every moment, every challenge, every joy, all of it, as long as it ended with me here beside you. We are not ending yet, Tabitha said with a smile. We have years left to enjoy our grandchildren and annoy our children with unsolicited advice and watch sunsets from this hill. That sounds perfect, Vincent said. Absolutely perfect. As the sun dipped below the horizon and the first stars began to appear, Vincent and Tabitha Caldwell sat together in the place where they had married, where they had built their life, where they had proven that love and respect and choice could create something lasting and true. They were two people who had defied expectations, who had chosen partnership over obligation, who had built a legacy that would endure long after they were gone. And in that moment, surrounded by the land they loved and the life they had created, they were exactly where they were meant to be, together by choice for always.